Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. The general debate of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly is already underway, with the United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres making his opening speech at the inaugural session. We also saw an important speech by the President of the United Nations General Assembly's 79th session, Mr. Philemon Yang. Later on, we saw a number of important speeches that include of US President Joe Biden and a short while ago of the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. We also know for a fact that Pakistan is being represented by its Prime Minister Mia Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif, who is going to address this August gathering on the 27th of September. And according to the Foreign Office, during his important address at this high-level mood, the Prime Minister is going to reaffirm Pakistan's steadfast commitment to multilateralism, and he is also going to reaffirm Pakistan's support to the role of the United Nations in fostering global peace, security and prosperity. The Prime Minister is also going to emphasize the resolution of the long-standing issues on the agenda of the United Nations Security Council, including that of Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Prime Minister is also going to urge the international community to take decisive measures in order to combat climate change and Islamophobia. Let's specifically talk about today's important speeches and addresses made by the United Nations Secretary General himself, as well as the President of the United Nations General Assembly's 79th session's President. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, let me quote, that we see age of impunity everywhere in the Middle East, in the heart of Europe and in the Horn of Africa and beyond. And he has denounced this age or era of impunity. Also, the United Nations General Assembly 79th Sessions President Mr. Philemon Yang has urged for collective efforts to deal with the unprecedented and complex challenges the world is faced today. All these aspects are for discussion in today's show. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, his former ambassador. Ambassador Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Munawar Hussain, his foreign affairs expert. Dr. Hussain, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Let's begin with this particular point, Ambassador Khan. When we talk about this general debate during the high-level segment of the United Nations General Assembly, how significant it happens to be, and when we specifically talk about this particular term, general debate, we have seen important addresses being made by the world leaders, including the United Nations Secretary General, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, the US President, also the Turkish President. Now, when these addresses and speeches are being made, how does it actually impact the understanding of the United Nations as the world body, the international organization, and how does it formulate the policies or bring in those points or the facts which have been highlighted in those speeches in order to make policies and further for their implementation?
You see, there are 193 countries that are members of the United Nations General Assembly, and during this debate all of them get an opportunity to say something. Now, it isn't a debate as a college debate, it is an opportunity for each and every country to talk of the concerns that they have in terms of international matters and international concerns. So from that point of view, to give you an example, often countries which are ostracized by the West. I remember there was a time when Gaddafi was speaking there, Mr. Hugo Chavez was speaking from Venezuela. This is a point at which everybody gets to talk on the world stage and present their point of view. This, in my opinion, is a very, very important thing. What actually happens is that there are 6 committees in the United Nations General Assembly. There's the Committee for Disarmament, then there is a committee for economics, financial committee, then there is a committee for social, humanitarian and cultural causes. There's a committee for what we call special political affairs and decolonization. Then there's a committee which is for the administrative budgetary things, and finally there's a committee which is for legal affairs. So with so many countries that are participating and so many issues and discussions at hand, what happens is before the actual so-called debate starts, the relevant subjects are given to each of the committees, and they work on them and they present their recommendations and their reports to the members.
Right.
Now that is a very efficient way of finally each country's issue being discussed at length, and then a fair report is presented and everybody gets to have a copy of it. Apart from that, it is also an opportunity for countries to discuss the hottest issues. For example, the conflicts. There are 3 hot conflicts right now going on. The Israeli conflict in Gaza, the Ukrainian conflict, and the one in Sudan. So these are issues, again, when you get together at a place like this, you also have an opportunity to have several meetings every day on the sidelines. For example, our Prime Minister has gone there. He will be able to have 5 or 6 meetings every day before his speech. So that is another opportunity to actually be able to talk face to face with people and try to resolve issues or try to collect support for certain causes.
Right.
So then you also, in the Secretary General's speech, there were some very interesting points that perhaps we can discuss later.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make it, there is a proper agenda, and this is a very good opportunity for everybody to get together once a year.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Hussain into the discussion also. Now, this general debate, this high-level segment, quite comprehensively elaborated by Ambassador Khan. How does this basically work? And how the recommendations of the concerned committee are made regarding the agenda, regarding the hottest topics, the conflicts the world is facing at this particular point in time, or any point in time when this particular high-level segment happens to be. We have seen that very important address by US President Joe Biden, which is being termed one of his last to the world body also. He has talked about the crisis in Ukraine, talking about the strength of NATO. He has talked about Ukraine. So when there is a certain country involved in a certain situation, for example, Russia vis-a-vis a Ukraine conflict, and when US President Joe Biden is making an address on this particular podium, what does that actually mean for a country which is being specified in that address? Is there any possibility for the country to respond later on, and in what forms that country responds to it?
Look, United Nations is a product of liberalism. And liberalism is put forwarded by the United States of America, especially the founding fathers of the United States of America. We all know that the concept of League of Nations that was presented by President Wilson, and he gave argument to American people that our security, prosperity is connected with the security and prosperity with the international community. And the people of America did not accept this argument, but in the post-Second World War period, they accepted the same argument, and since then America has the interventionist policy. America politically, economically and militarily intervene here and there during the Cold War period and the post-Cold War and post-9/11. Now, United Nations, number one, it is a multilateral forum, and this is an inclusive forum, as Ambassador Saab has rightly pointed out, because all other forums, intergovernmental organizations, they are exclusive. Either they are regional or sub-regional organizations like G7, G20, BRICS, NATO, European Union, they are all exclusive. So this is the organization which provides opportunity to all nations to come together, to connect with each other, because miscommunication or gap of communication is a major source of conflict. Number two, United Nations, especially the General Assembly, it is based on the principle of democracy, because majority decides the resolution. So it means that if any nation denies that resolution, it means they are denying the very principle of democracy, whether it is India on the case of Kashmir or Israel on the case of Palestine. Right. Thirdly, I would say that the basic assumption of liberalism was that we need to provide a good institution that may create a good environment, and through that good environment we can promote peace and stability in the world. But now question is that is United Nations is successful in promoting peace in the world, especially the long standing issues like Kashmir and Palestine, and that is the serious challenge to the United Nations. So I would say in this changing international politics, whether it is a regional politics or international politics, the serious challenge to the existence or the usefulness of United Nations is how to develop a mechanism that may be adjusted as per the changes occurring in international politics in order to resolve the long standing issues and to make the body more effective.
So Dr. Hussain, you rightly talked about that very principle on which this foundation of the United Nations, the world body, actually stands, the principle of democracy. Whenever there happens to be a vote regarding a pressing issue at the United Nations General Assembly, we see a majority going either way, in the favor of that particular resolution or against, and there is a very lesser number of states which go the other way around, whether in the favor of that, whether against that particular thing. When specifically we talk about the other major organ of the United Nations that happens to be the United Nations Security Council, you also talked about the long-standing issues that happen to be the challenge at this particular point in time for the UN as the world body, including that of Kashmir as well as of the Palestinian issue. So we clearly understand that UNGA works on the principle of democracy. The majority is the authority. When we talk about the United Nations Security Council, that is a particular point that has been also highlighted by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that the privileged five of the UNSC, how crucial when we talk about the reforms of that particular organ of the UN is concerned. Is it intrinsically inclusive and democratic as on the principles of UNGA?
Look, as far as United States of America is concerned, if we observe the trends and patterns in American foreign policy, we would find liberalism and realism, they go hand in hand. On the one side, within America, they are liberal, but outside of America, they are very realist. I mean, they use military force as important instrument of American foreign policy for the pursuance of their three important goals, historical goals like prosperity, security, and promotion of American ideals. So this is the reason that America failed to convince, especially the global South, that how and why a Security Council, which is non-democratic in its nature, is important and significant at this moment. And this is again a very serious challenge, that how to make at least Security Council a democratic institution where the representation of all nations has to be. And this is not only only the issue of the country which are middle range power or the underdeveloped or developing nations, but even the developed nations like China, like Russia, like South Africa, like Brazil, they are also raising the issue that it has to be reformed. Right. So this is the time, again I would say, that United Nations in a changing dynamic international politics, it has to be dynamic, it must not be static. And if it remains static, it means that United Nations is providing the space for other intergovernmental organization to play its role, providing an opportunity to non-state actors to resolve the issues with the help of their own power, which is we are observing in the case of Gaza, where Hashd-e-Shaibi, Ansarullah, Hamas, Hezbollah, they are playing very significant role, because the new colonial structure where states, they are unable to perform as per the wishes of their people.
What about the state of Israel? I mean, when you talked about these particular certain number of groups that you have just mentioned, terming them quote unquote the non-state actors. So what about these states, just like Israel? Where happens to be the responsibility of the United Nations, the world body? Let's keep the difference between UNGA and UNSC aside for a moment, but the sole objective and the aim for the establishment of this world body to ensure international peace and security in the aftermath of the World War II. Where does that particular United Nations as a body stand? I'll come back to you for that particular understanding of yours. Ambassador Khan, as put forth by Dr. Hussain, UNGA works on the principle of democracy. We see a vote happening over there, a resolution being brought into the UNGA. We saw most recently that one happening. That was overwhelmingly passed in the case of in the favor of a ceasefire as far as the situation in the Gaza is concerned. But we see the resolution of the UNGA, which works on the principle of majority is the authority, on the principle of democracy, doesn't happen to be binding. The resolution of UNSC, which happens to be with 5 permanent members and 10 other members, those resolutions happen to be binding. So how do you think such type of conflicts that happen to be long-standing could be resolved when two organs, the major organs of the UN, are working on two different principles, one on democracy, the other with the privilege?
You see, as far as the United Nations General Assembly is concerned, any decisions, any votes, any resolutions, they are not binding in the sense that they cannot compel a country to act a certain way. But in the international community through a majority makes a statement, and that has an impact on the conflict in question or on the conduct of a certain country. Now, as far as the United Nations Security Council is concerned, if that votes upon an issue, barring any veto by the permanent 5, as you say, then it is absolutely binding, and then you can also create a coalition of countries' forces to go on the ground and try to resolve the conflict by force. But in 3rd of November 1950, there was a resolution passed called Uniting for Peace, which basically says that if there is a threat to peace, if there is a major aggression, and in such a case we want to bring about a quick peace and the Security Council fails to act because one permanent member might cast a negative vote, then the United Nations General Assembly can take up that issue on a urgent level and vote on it. Now that has a different impact, and as far as the net result of this is concerned, again, what really matters is where the important players, the important powers, whether they are going to be willing to take action or not. So many people have been discussing this thing, that if the sole purpose or the major purpose or the major reason of the United Nations is to prevent wars and conflict, then when you have a veto with 5 people, very often it doesn't work out, because it's a very large organization. During the Cold War, for example, there were 2 distinct groups that were created. There was the Soviet bloc and the Western bloc. And especially the Soviet bloc were very cohesive, and they voted together in every instance. And as you know, one of them carried a veto. So this makes things very, very complicated. And as a result...
Ambassador Khan, I see your part of the interjection over here. That is exactly the point that people like me are curious to understand about when we try to compare the functioning or the effectiveness of the 2 major organs of the United Nations, the UNGA, 193 members.
Yeah.
A vote happens there, a much bigger collective understanding of an issue comes there. A majority votes either way in the favor or against that particular resolution which has been put forth. In comparison to that, we see the other organ whose resolutions are binding, and it has got 5 privileged votes, the negative votes. If one of the permanent 5 members votes either way, that bill is not that particular resolution is not going to be accepted.
Absolutely.
Right. What actually is more, as far as the weight is concerned, the importance or the significance is concerned, the collective will or the understanding of 153 countries out of 193 who voted overwhelmingly for the end of war or conflict in Gaza, as compared to 1 negative vote of a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So that's why, that's why the issues and the conflicts keep lingering on.
Absolutely. You see, there is no doubt that from a moral standpoint, the vote of 193 members voting ought to carry more weight than fewer members in the Security Council. But from a legal point of view, as the Charter and the law stands at the moment, it is the Security Council. So this is something which has been contrived by the powers post-World War II. And obviously, if you want to be able to successfully serve one of the purposes, which is to prevent wars, then you will have to remove that power of veto to make it more just, make the system more just. But then again, at the same time, when it comes to implementation, it is not small minor countries who have the clout or the military strength to be able to go and implement certain decisions of the Security Council. It is the major powers. It is the major powers that can actually get a coalition together and go and do that. But you are absolutely right. However, I have to point out that along with this, you mentioned the organs. There are like 6 organs of state, one of which of the UN, and one of which is the International Court of Justice. So the important part that the UNGA also plays is to be able to elect the judges that go on the International Court of Justice, and matters can be referred there. And whether you will comply by the orders of the International Court of Justice or not, once that decision comes, you are convicted in that offense, and that is a very major thing. There is no time bar on that. You see, if you had the case of the Serbian dictators or leaders, years later, the Croatian leader Radovan Karadzic and Milosevic, they were caught and they were taken and they were prosecuted as war criminals. So these are some very, in the case of Israel, there are some very blatant war crimes being committed, and the International Court of Justice has ruled against them. So there is a possibility that there may be a situation where some of these people who were involved may be brought to justice. So similarly, the other work that the United Nations...
But the conflict still rages on. With this particular, there is a threat of more escalation.
Yes.
With impunity. That particular state of Israel is carrying its operations. Firstly, we saw that that one happening in Gaza on the innocent people in Gaza, where majority of the women people who succumbed to that brutality of Israeli defense forces happen to be women and children. That is exactly what has been alluded to by US President Joe Biden. Let me quote a couple of excerpts from his important speech that he made today at the UNGA's 79th session. This is the time to end the ongoing war in Gaza. We've seen whenever there happened to be a vote at the UNSC, it was the US vetoing that one. How does that go with this particular statement by Biden that it is time to end the ongoing war in Gaza? We are concerned about the rising violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. We have to ensure better conditions for Palestinians, including the two-state solution. Also saying that Palestinians should get right to self-determination and a state of their own. Any conformity in the actions or the policies of the US administration under Biden with these statements that he has made at the UNGA?
Well, as far as the statement itself is concerned, in my opinion, it is not practical or important in practical terms. It is a soundbite that's coming out prior to the US elections, because they know that people are outraged, people are saddened, people are dismayed by the number of people they see being killed. But on the other hand, the one single thing that Biden could do is to stop supplying weapons to them. The number of weapons that continue to go in there, in my opinion, it is nothing but hypocrisy. But you also know that there is a very strong lobby within the United States which controls the political narrative on both sides of the political divide. Both the parties are influenced by that, and no member of Congress, or very few members of Congress, could ever dare to speak against it or do something practical in practical terms. So a lot of this, as I said, is pure soundbite.
Right.
It is for the consumption of the public, because they know the domestic public opinion is not only against genocide.
The kind of massive protests at the universities
but they are
going
also
on.
very concerned about the tremendous expense that wars are costing them, both
all
in
about
Ukraine
taxpayers' money.
and in Israel. Yeah, taxpayers' money, where you have homeless people, where you have a derelict infrastructure. They know very well that we would rather spend, I mean, this is now common sense. So,
Right, Dr. Hussain, going back to that particular point, when we talk about that very nature of the UNSC in particular, what could be the ideal reforms at this particular point in history where all the world leaders talk about it? How could it be made more inclusive and more democratic?
Tehami Sahab, as far as reform is concerned, they cannot be successful unless you have resources. Who is providing resources to the United Nations? It is the global north. And unfortunately, this is the reason that there is a misperception that we consider global north as international community, not the member of the global south. If in majority they vote in favor of the Palestine, but we do not consider it as the resolution passed by the international community, you see. So now, first of all, the important members of the global south, they have to provide resources, peacekeeping forces, and the required things through which they can implement the resolutions. Now, there are a number of resolutions by the United Nations Security Council on the Kashmir, on Palestine, but they are not implemented. Why resolution on East Timor, Darfur, South Sudan, Bosnia, why they are passed? Because resources are provided by the global north.
Passed and implemented.
Passed and implemented by the United Nations. Why? Because resources are provided by the global north. So now global south, they have a serious concerns regarding the effectiveness of the United Nations. They can address their concerns if they are ready to provide resources to the United Nations. Second, they have to bring reform even in the United Nations General Assembly, because the resolution which is passed in the General Assembly, it is based on the democratic principles which I mentioned earlier. Now UN must penalize those states which are denying those resolutions by some diplomatic efforts or through some economic penalties. At least they can deny their resolutions and concerns for some time, so that they may realize that at least the nations which are taking decision regarding a certain issue, that decision must be respected. And they must not oppose it, as we are observing in the case of Palestine, that 14 global north members, they denied it, and almost 43 they remained abstain.
Don't you think that that particular thing that you are suggesting actually also goes against the principle of democracy, because it's the very nature of democracy that there has to be an opposition, a different point of view. If the countries or the states which are opposed to a certain idea or a certain view or a certain resolution being brought in at the UNGA, that's a very much natural and inherent right of every state to go that way.
Now Western countries, they are making liberalism more liberal. They damn about the public opinion we are observing in the case of United States. Even if we observe in the West, they are giving preferences to the technocrats. Even in America, the American think tanks, they are talking about the deep state. Why deep state? Because they want to a strong state and central position and a strong hierarchy that can serve American security interest. Ideally, Americans always take a realist actions in the external world, but they justify with the ideal approach why they are going Iraq to liberate the Iraqi people. Why Soviet Union has to be destroyed and dismantled, because it was an evil empire. So this is an ideal approach. So I think Americans, they are, or the Western country, they are not serious with this their liberal agenda, and this is the reason that they are supporting Israel, backing India, which is exactly a real threat to the liberal world order. When they are taking actions, they are violating international laws, they are putting behind all the resolutions of the United Nations, they are committing violation of the human rights. They are involved in terror financing. They are killing the innocent civilians.
Well taken.
They are attacking UN camps and schools and hospitals.
I receive your point well. Unfortunately, we are short of time. As we know for a fact, this particular high-level segment, the inaugural session is already underway. There are a lot of speeches being made as we speak also. So I have to go towards the conclusion. Let's specifically talk about Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister is representing the country over there. A high-level delegation, including the Defense Minister, Information Minister, is along with him. He's going to address this August gathering on the 27th of September, going to emphasize the resolution or the addressal of the long-standing issues, including of that of Palestine and Kashmir. Also, Pakistan's commitment towards multilateralism and support to the role of the UN. Also, there are two important issues. Pakistan has been actually making a lot of efforts as far as the United Nations platform is concerned. Islamophobia and climate change. How important and crucial an opportunity for Pakistani authorities at this particular point in time is to highlight Pakistan has been a victim of climate change, the devastating floods back in 2022, Islamophobia, which saw that International Day Against Islamophobia, 15th of March, spearheaded by Pakistan. That was a resolution adopted at the UNGA. How crucial an opportunity for Pakistan this is? Quickly regarding that.
Pakistan is a middle-range power. Pakistan has influence an important country, at least in the region, and that is mentioned again and again by the US administration as well as the US scholars. So therefore, I believe that as far as the trend in Pakistani's foreign policy is concerned, always they supported multilateralism. They want to resolve the long-standing issues through the United Nations resolution. And I think as far as climate change is concerned, Pakistan is demanding the implementation of COP28 and 29. And therefore, I believe that this is a golden opportunity for the Pakistani Prime Minister to interact with the all important nations, whether they belong to the global south and global north, to resolve the issues and concerns which the international community is facing.
Point well taken. Mr. Ambassador Nasir Ali Khan, unfortunately we are short of time. I'll have to end the show over here. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight and for this insightful discussion. Dr. Munawar Hussain, foreign affairs expert, joining us in the studio as well. Thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.